I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joyofbaking.com. Today we're going to make a pumpkin cranberry cake, and this is what it looks like. This is a really moist and flavorful cake. Not only does it have that earthy flavor of the pumpkin, but it also has ground cinnamon, ginger, allspice. We're also going to add some chopped nuts and some dried cranberries. This cake is really good on its own or maybe with a dollop of whipped cream, but today we're going to frost it with a cream cheese frosting and then top that with even more chopped nuts. So the first thing that you will need to do is to preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 180 degrees Celsius. And then you will need a 9-inch square baking pan, that's 23 centimeters. Now we're going to both butter and flour our pan, and what I've done is just melted a little bit of butter, and then I'm just going to take a pastry brush, brush that. The other choice is you can buy cooking sprays that have the flour in them, so you could use that as well if you don't want to do this, but we're going to do it the old-fashioned way today. So once you butter, then I have just all-purpose flour, plain flour. I'm just going to put some in here. And then I'm just going to swirl my pan to get it bottom and all the sides. Looks good. Now, if you're at home, not on camera, do this over the sink. It's much, because it gets a little messy. But I am going to bang my pan to get rid of all that excess flour into the sink, so it's going to get a little noisy. Okay, so that's what you're looking for. Now, we are going to add, I said, some chopped nuts. I'm using pecans today. Walnuts is a really good choice, or you could use hazelnuts, almonds. I like to toast my nuts first. So you will need 1 cup, which is 100 grams of, like I said, I'm using pecans. So what I do, or pecans, just put them on a baking sheet and put them in the oven for 6-8 minutes until you start to smell them. Then take them out and then cool and then coarsely chop. When you toast your nuts, it really brings out the flavor. So we have that. So now for our batter. If you have a stand mixer like I have here, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer for this. This is essentially a butter cake with pumpkin added, so it's going to be more like dense textured than a regular butter cake, but still has that buttery flavor. So the first thing you will need is a 1/2 cup, 113 grams of butter. Have your butter at room temperature. I'm using unsalted here today. I like the flavor, and I also like unsalted because that way I can control the amount of salt in the recipe. But if you have a favorite salted butter, like I always said, you can use that. So now I'm just going to beat this until it's nice and smooth. Okay. I do this step for a couple of reasons. One, like, sometimes my butter is just a little cold, so if you beat it first and get it nice and smooth, that way it'll soften on its own. Okay, the next thing we need to add is 1 cup, 200 grams of light brown sugar. If you are using a cup measurement, when you put the sugar in there, just kind of pat it down to get rid of all the air pockets. And then I'm going to also add 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of pure vanilla extract. That's simply for flavoring, so if you don't want a vanilla flavor, you can just leave that out. So now I'm going to beat this on medium-high speed for a couple minutes. I want to get everything mixed together, and then I want to get some air into the mixture as well. Okay, so scrape down. As always, when you're doing a cake batter, periodically stop, scrape down the sides and bottom of the bowl just to make sure everything gets mixed together. So there we have it. We're just getting some air in there and everything nicely mixed together. So now what we're going to do is add 2 large eggs, which is 100 grams, Have your eggs at room temperature. I'm going to add them one at a time, beat one in and then beat the second. Okay, and the second one. Okay, let's give that a quick scrape. So now, for our dry ingredients, in a separate bowl, I have 1 3/4 cups, which is 225 grams of all-purpose flour, plain flour. To that, I'm going to add 1/4 of a teaspoon, 1 gram of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of baking soda, 4 grams, 1/4 of a teaspoon, 1 gram of salt, and then for our spices, today I'm going to add 3/4 of a teaspoon of ground cinnamon, 1/4 of a teaspoon of ground ginger, and 1/4 of a teaspoon of ground allspice. If you don't, a lot of people don't have ground allspice in the house. So what you could do is, instead of that, put it depends, like 1/8 to 1/4 of a teaspoon of ground cloves. If you really like ground cloves, then I would use 1/4, not so much. Or, really you can leave it out. This is one of those things where you can kind of adjust. If you really like ground cinnamon, you can go up to a teaspoon. If you don't, you can go down to a half. So I'm just going to use a whisk you want to make sure, especially you get that baking soda, baking powder really mixed into your flour mixture. So what I'm going to do, the typical, butter cake batter, I'm going to add this in 3 additions, and I'm going to alternate that with my wet ingredients. We have 1/4 cup, 60 milliliters, 60 grams of just milk at room temperature. You can use, if you want the richer tasting cake, then you can use a whole milk. I'm actually using a reduced fat 2% today. And then, of course, we need pumpkin. 1 cup, 220 grams of pure pumpkin puree. Now, I'll be honest, I just buy the can. I've made it homemade, and then I've just bought the pumpkin, the can. I don't notice the difference in my cake. So, but if you make sure to buy it, look on the ingredient. You don't want ones that like a pumpkin, like the spice in it. So don't buy that. Just the pure pumpkin puree. If you want to make your own, go to the joybaking.com website, and in the head note of this recipe, I will tell you how to do it using pumpkin. So, covered both of those. So now I'm going to put about 1/3 of my flour mixture in there. I'm just going to beat it on low speed just until it's incorporated. Okay, so I'm just going to add about half of my pumpkin in there, just eyeball it, and some of my milk. Beat that in. Okay, more flour. And the rest of our. Now, when you buy if you're going to buy it, the pumpkin, we're only using like half a can. So you can either refrigerate it for about 5 days, or you can even freeze the leftovers for another time. Such a pretty color batter. So now I'm going to add the rest of my flour, and I'm going to add chopped nuts. Also, if you just want a plain cake, you don't want the crunch of the nuts, you can just leave out the nuts. And then I have a half a cup, 70 grams of dried cranberries. When you kind of go through your cranberries, you could take a little of your flour if you wanted to, and kind of, they tend to stick together. And I don't want a big clump of cranberries, so just go through that. So if you don't want cranberries, first you can leave out the dried fruit altogether. You could use dried cherries, you could use raisins, or any other dried fruit that you'd like. And if you want lots of dried fruit, you could go up, like I'm using half a cup, 70 grams. You could go up to a cup if you wanted to, 140 grams. So now I'm just going to beat this in. Okay, so we are done. That wasn't too hard. I kind of think of this as like a snacking cake. So like I said, it's good plain, it's good with, really good with the cream cheese frosting, or sometimes I just with whipped cream. It's a nice weekday dessert. Or for when the kids come home from school. So now, make sure I've got all that flour and everything all mixed in. And then into the pan. So then you can just use a spoon. I'm using an offset spatula. Just smooth it out. Nice and evenly. Get in those corners. It's a nice alternative to like a layer cake. Easy to make. You can serve it right out of the pan. Okay, that looks good. So now, as I always say, everyone's oven is a little different, but I'm going to say 25 minutes. It'll rise, not too much, but it will rise a bit. Turn a beautiful golden brown, and of course a toothpick inserted into the center will come out clean. I do rotate my pan front to back about halfway through just to get a nice even bake. So about 25 minutes should be done. Okay, so our pumpkin cake is now done. Beautiful golden brown. I put a toothpick into the center, came out clean. And you can also, another way is see it start just barely starting to separate from the sides of the pan. So now put your pan on a wire rack and we're going to let this cool. Now, you don't have to take it out of the pan. I'm actually going to show you how to take it out, but a lot of times I just leave it in the pan and then just put the frosting on. So I'm going to let this cool about 10-15 minutes and then we'll come back and take it out of the pan. So I let the cake cool about 15 minutes. So now I'm using an offset spatula. You use a knife. Just run it on the inside just to make sure it's not sticking. And then I'm take wire rack, put on top, flip, take it off like so. And then I'm going to flip it back so it's right side up. Like that. Of course, like I said before, you do not have to take it out of the pan. A lot of times it's like a snacking cake. I don't bother, but just so you know how to do that. Now, I'm going to let this cool completely, and then when we come back, we will make our cream cheese frosting. So, our cake is at room temperature, so now we're going to make our cream cheese frosting. Again, if you have a stand mixer, use your paddle attachment, or you could use a hand mixer for this. And the first thing we will need is 4 tablespoons, 55 grams of, again, I'm using unsalted butter. Have your butter at room temperature, but you could use salted butter. And also cream cheese frosting. We need 6 ounces, which is 170 grams of, I'm using like the regular full fat cream cheese, and have that at room temperature. I'm just going to put both of those in my mixer, and I'm going to beat it on low speed just until it's nice and smooth, everything's mixed together. Okay, so I'll give that a good scrape. Takes a minute or two because you have to stop your mixer a lot because cream cheese is kind of sticky, so be patient. So now we will need 1 cup, which is 120 grams of confectioner sugar. You may know that as either powdered or icing sugar. I did sift, or I'm just using a strainer. If you have a sifter, use that. Because, you know, powdered sugar tends to have lumps, so get rid of that. And put that in there along with 1 teaspoon, 4 grams of pure vanilla extract for flavoring. Again, if you don't like a vanilla flavor, you can leave that out. So now I'm going to start the mixer on low speed. I don't want that sugar coming up in my face. And then I'm going to beat this, continue to beat it on medium speed. I want to get everything really mixed together. Plus, I want a little air in there because I want it kind of light, the frosting. So maybe a minute or two. Okay, that's good. Scrape. If you wanted to color your frosting, you could at this point add a few drops of your favorite color. I don't want to waste any of that frosting. Okay. So I did put my cake on a serving platter. Like I said, typically I just leave it in the pan because I kind of, like I said, call this like a snacking cake. It's not like a real formal cake, but you can make it a little more formal by putting it on a pretty pedestal. And I'm just going to frost the top, but there is enough frosting here if you want to take it down the sides. And again, I'll repeat, you do not have to frost this cake. It is excellent on its own, or, you know, with a little bit of whipped cream. Whipped cream always goes good with everything, in my mind. So then I'm using an offset spatula. You just use a knife, back of a spoon, spread that out. Now, if you put a cream cheese frosting on the top of the cake, you will have to refrigerate it. But, you know, it's really good cold. It kind of gets, the cake will get a little denser in texture, which I kind of like. If you don't frost the cake, then you can, you know, store it at room temperature. A couple of options there. It does freeze very well. Looks good. Don't get too fancy here. And then, I mean, it looks really good like that. But if you want, since whatever nut you used in the cake, this case pecans, I like to, you can sprinkle the top with some more. That way people know there's nuts in the cake. Sometimes I also like to use pumpkin seeds. That's really kind of cool. I'll leave that up to you. So there we have our cake. Looks nice. Pumpkin cranberry cake. And let's try a slice. Whenever you cut a cake with frosting, I like to just take paper towel or cloth and wipe my knife so that you get a nice clean cut. I'm going to put some more pecans on there. Oh, look at that. Isn't that wonderful? It's very moist, and it's lots of flavor. Because, like I said, we have that earthy pumpkin flavor. We have the spices. We have the chopped pecans and the dried cranberries. And then, of course, that wonderful cream cheese frosting. It's one of my favorite types of frosting. And then even a little more pecans on top. Very nice cake. Perfect, you know, in the fall, winter. It seems like more of a fall, winter type of cake, but really have it any time of the year. And like I said, if you have the cream cheese frosting on the top, it will need to be refrigerated, you know, for around 3-4 days. You could probably keep it, or you could freeze it. So you got to try this one. And until next time, I'm Stephanie Jaworski of joybaking.com.